Alrighty, so I'd like you to open the work files for 0307, Anisotropy and Angle. And we'll open up this first one which says concentric circles. Now, this is very typical, the type of effect that you would want to use anisotropy and angle for. It's very much a basic material. The roughness is set for 25, the anisotropy is set for 100, and the angle is set for a map. This is where the angle map comes into play. Generally speaking, the anisotropy, you're not going to have too many maps for that. I mean, you can use it sometimes, and I do use it sometimes, but it's a little bit more nebulous as to when you want to use that. And it would be difficult for me to show you that without showing you some other things, so I'll come back to that topic later. But for right now, we're going to focus on the angle maps. This is the angle map for this particular bit of anisotropy that you see. And the important thing to know about this is that the way that anisotropy and the angle work together is anisotropy basically says how much is the light going to be pulled along those grooves, so to speak. And then we have to create the direction that the grooves are flowing in. And the way that the angle works, as we already talked about, is 360 degrees. So white represents 0 and black represents 359, I guess 360. And the idea being here is that all these shades of gray represent a different angle. So what we're effectively doing is we're taking that groove and we're bending it by having this sort of radial angle gradient, as you can see here, that goes from white to black all the way through. And all I did was I just extended that selection out a little bit and reversed the gradient. Extended the selection out a little bit, reversed the gradient. And did that several times in order to create these bands of angles of gradient that is showing the anisotropy flowing in opposite directions. It's a really nice look, and it's one that is very commonly seen in high-end furniture finishes for aluminum and different types of polished metals. And it's also used for effects for things like old albums, the old vinyl albums, and to a lesser extent, CDs. So this can be a very, very useful little trick. And it actually has a couple different flavors to it. So let's go ahead and look at some of the others. This one is your typical type anisotropy that you normally see. This is your fans sort of approach. And what I mean by fans is basically that they take a circular polisher and they polish a circle and they overlap it and polish another circle and they overlap it and polish another circle. And I basically created a grayscale map here that reproduces this effect by simply creating a gradient, creating a gradient, creating a gradient, and just overlapping them in Photoshop, which is very easy to do. The end result is, as you can see here, this very nice sort of look that you get a lot with polished aluminum type objects in kitchens and sometimes tabletops and stuff like this. It's used a lot for a nice decorative finish that just gives you something a little bit different than your standard brushed metal. But speaking of brushed metal, we have absolute control over how we would do brushed metal as well. When we look at this last one, this is stripes. And the angle map here is stripes. Now, you'll notice here that I did adjust the brightness. Remember that we're dealing with 360 degrees. And what I wanted was every other stripe to alternate the way it's flowing at a 90-degree angle. And in order to do that, I had to mathematically figure out where in our spectrum would 90 degrees be from black. And that came out right around 64, 65. So I adjusted the brightness until we got black and 64, 65, which it happens to be 66 here, as the difference so that we get this adjustment between a regular flow of 0 and then a flow of 90, then 0 and 90. So we can control very precisely our brushed metal if we're doing some sort of striped brushed metal where we're having things flowing in different directions. It's a nice look. It's, again, a very decorative type of thing. It's usually more of a high-end kind of look that gives plain metal a little bit more juice, visually speaking. You can use any kind of map you want But the idea being is that it will respect all the shades of gray as well as the black and white, and color has absolutely no impact on either anisotropy maps or angle maps.